Hello everybody, Justin from Playing Board Games here, and today I have another list video. It is 5 spoiler-free tips for you for the Scarlet Keys. People have been asking when I was going to get back to this series, and I didn't realize how long it was since the Edge of the Earth episode. So today, I am here to help you figure out how to prepare for the Scarlet Keys without spoiling anything specific from the campaign. Some of these tips, as they always are a little bit, well, duh, I always do that, but all these campaigns carry a little bit of extra baggage that makes these tips actually the tips that they are. So I think we should just dive in, go through all 5 tips pretty quickly, and get you started on a very successful Scarlet Keys campaign in your near future. First tip here is let's try that one more time. Inconsequential investigate, fights, and evades are important. There's an interesting reason for this, and the big thing is just that you need to be doing a lot of investigating, fighting, evading, or ultimately also dealing damage or discovering clues in a way that is different than how it is approached in other campaigns. In most other campaigns, when you are investigating, you're just investigating your location to get clues, you're fighting enemies to fight enemies, and you're evading enemies to kick the can down the road, maybe. But in Scarlet Keys, it goes above and beyond that, and it instead becomes something that is you need to do to constantly be progressing the story. So it's one of those things where if you can ever do them for free, or if you're able to compound stuff to do like these actions to be better. Some examples of this are Beat Cop is very nice for this because he can just deal a damage. Field Agent is she can just discover a clue. I really like Butterfly Swords in Scarlet Keys because it allows you to fight multiple times. So basically these things that allow you to do stuff for free or quickly or while also getting extra other value is very nice in Scarlet Keys. It's just going to take a lot more stress off of you than you actually aren't even you won't even be aware of until you've played Scarlet Keys a few times. Rex Murphy is also somehow very good in this campaign as well because his ability gets an incidental clue. Likewise with Trish Garber and her ability. Basically, all that kind of stuff. Just inconsequential clues, investigates, fights, damage, evade. They can all add up to be just very good at just eking out small pieces of value from the Scarlet Keys campaign, and it's a big recommendation and my first spoiler-free tip for you here. Next up, Shroud numbers are higher in this campaign, and Shroud numbers are going to gate progress in more ways than other campaigns gate progress. This doesn't seem like too much of a crazy tip, right? Where just, I'm saying the Shroud numbers are higher, so your Clover is going to, need to get clues better. But this is actually something that kind of has a ripple effect. I've heard stories of people who bring, like, for example, Ashcan Pete to this campaign, and this Ashcan Pete wasn't really prepared for what this campaign asks of you, especially in higher player counts, and the Ashcan Pete had some stumbles because of that, because when you usually have like a pretty decent spread of 1, 2, 3 Shroud locations and then a few 4 on the top end, this campaign kind of hovers around 2, 3, 4 and then 5 on the top end, which doesn't sound like a big change, but when you're looking at your first few locations are all being like 3 Shroud, it kind of becomes like, where is the one that I can get the easy value from and then save my burst value for the higher Shroud locations, which is what is a normal, common experience for other campaigns. But in Scarlet Keys, it's a little bit different for that reason. There was a campaign, a scenario in this campaign that I actually was recording yesterday, and it had 2 5-Shroud locations for the first 2 locations of the scenario. There were some lower Shroud locations that came with it, but this is just an example of how the numbers in this campaign are higher via Shroud, because Shroud challenges more than just the book or the seeker investigators or the clue investigators for this one. It's a very interesting twist on the campaign, and it's just something you should be aware of. If you are going to be getting clues in a traditional way, you're probably going to be okay, But if you're trying to get clues in a non-traditional way, like a survivor, for example, or even a rogue having to use lockpicks, you might be breaking your lockpicks more, or you might be needing to use more survivor tools in order to get it done to make sure their consistency is pretty strong because of that. What it matters is all this, like I said, I don't want to go too spoiler heavy for this, but this also impacts the fighters in ways that you'll soon understand pretty quick in the first scenario in the campaign. So just trust me, it all really matters. And that carries over into our third tip, which is going to be the most no-duh tip I've ever done for one of these videos. You'll want ways to consistently fight, investigate, or evade. It says investigator, but that's just my little Easter egg for all of you, because I like to do one spelling error just to, you know, get you guys a little bit hyped when you see it, because you go, oh, Poggy, it's the Justin spelling error. But that's, you'll want ways to consistently fight, investigate, or evade. When I say this is a no-duh kind of tip, a big reason for this is that you always want to be able to consistently fight, investigate, or evade. But if you haven't picked it up yet, one of the biggest roadblocks and mechanics of this campaign is that you're going to need to do a lot of fighting, investigate, or evading for reasons that goes beyond the traditional reasons you're going to do it. So it's not necessarily only about getting clues, fighting enemies, or evading enemies. There is some extra baggage on top of all that. So you're going to want to be able to do this just more consistently. This means, for example, ammo builds with fighters are kind of tough. So you're going to want to be able to make sure that, yes, if you're going to be playing with firearms, which you can certainly do, you're going to want to be able to use those firearms, but you're also going to want to be able to find extra ways to not use those firearms all the time for your job of fighting, for example. If you are a mystic investigator and you have to use your shriveling or your clairvoyance in order to get clues, in order to get clues or fight, you're going to want to find ways on top of that. I have a big belief that mystics have a harder time in the Scarlet Keys. It's not an impossible time, but it is a harder time for mystic investigators. And I think that this tip right here, the most obvious tip in the world, is a part of that. So if you're, for example, a mystic, you might want to consider bringing in a sixth sense, or if you only have stuff that is in current right now, you'll want to grab like a dowsing rod or a ceremonial sickle. Ceremonial sickle isn't great, dowsing rod's pretty good, just as a way for you to consistently fight, investigate, or evade with your willpower score, with your brain, your highest skill. Because if you're spending resources all the time to fight, investigate, or evade, Scarlet Keys is going to be a tough time. So that's kind of what it comes down to, is that you want to be able to do this without putting all of your resources into it. Because sometimes you're going to need to get the job done, and finding a way to do that without spending everything is going to be the difference between a successful scenario and a scenario with a few like speed bumps on the way. On to tip number 4. There's a slightly bigger risk of one-ofs in your deck, but there's also a slightly bigger risk for multiple copies. This one is a little bit strange, and I don't want to get too spoilery for this one, but I'm going to give like a vague, as spoiler-free description as I can here. But the idea is that there is a mechanic in this one that is going to take cards from you in various ways. And sometimes you can get those cards back, sometimes you cannot. This is where there is a bigger risk of one-ofs, where if you are building around a one-of in your deck, for example, an exceptional card, or alternatively, you're only going to do one version of this really strong XP card in your deck because you have ways to find it, that card could just suddenly vanish. It could be gone from your deck, and you won't be able to play it anymore. Sometimes you can get it back, but most of the times you can't. It's just when it's gone, it's gone. There are ways to do it, but you have to like rely on other draws or the scenario itself to give you ways to like do that. But for the most part, for all intents and purposes, when you lose a card, it might be gone for good. Just expect it. So there is a risk of running one-ofs. I'm not saying don't do it, because if you have good card draw, if you have good ways to find it out, if you're good at canceling or ignoring effects from the game, or if you're just good at passing tests, you're able to slightly mitigate the risk of this, but sometimes it just happens. So it's one of those things where don't not do it, right? Like don't play one-ofs, but just be aware that if you are playing one-ofs, there is a bigger risk of then getting gobbled up. On the inverse of that, there is a slight risk as well for multiple copies, because some of these cards care about matching cards that you have versus cards that they've stolen. I think there is a much bigger risk of the 2 for one-ofs, so that's why I have this here as the main one, and I kind of just have the other one because it is just a fact. But it's one of those things where I will always run multiple copies, and I still will run one-ofs in Scarlet Keys, but it's just something that I am aware of in the back of my mind, and I'm passing it on to all of you. Especially this one matters more for in scenario, not so much when you're planning your deck, because you're going to make a lot of decisions where you're like, I want to... One of these cards was taken from me, I'm going to get rid of the card that wasn't taken from me. And if it's already in play, good luck and Godspeed, because you might suddenly get a Rude Awakening. Last tip here is pay attention to the campaign guide. This one is kind of a meta tip. There is a lot of discourse online about how this campaign can kind of meander, because it's an open world campaign and you kind of can do whatever you want. However, big note is that the campaign guide actually does a very good job of telling you where all of the scenarios are so you can avoid the meandering. It tells you where you should go, kind of a lead for what that location can be, and it tells you, hey, maybe you should go seek that out. So as opposed to just spinning the wheel, rolling the dice, and seeing what happens, pay attention to the campaign guide, read the dossiers for the direction, and you'll likely have a better experience for the Scarlet Keys than you would otherwise. Because I do think that the people who have just gone in a random direction and read a million things that weren't the scenario, like read a million events that weren't a scenario, only kind of really have themselves to blame, because the campaign guide does do a very good job of giving you the direction to go. So it's just something that I really want to like stress for your first campaign. When you get to the part where it starts telling you directions that you should follow, leads that you should pursue, follow those directions, pursue those leads, and you will have a very smooth blind play on the meta side of the campaign. It's very possible. It's very possible. So don't ignore the advice. Don't just go on your own. Follow the dossiers and you will have a great time. Those were my 5 spoiler-free tips for the Scarlet Keys. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you look forward to the Feast of Hemlock Vale, which will not be as long of a break before the next one, I promise you that. Thank you everyone who has enjoyed these series. I always like hearing from new players that they use these before they start a campaign, and I hope this one proves to also be helpful and beneficial to you. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all for watching. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, commenting, subscribing. You can go above and beyond and join all these awesome patrons down here as well. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and as always, a GG's.